So once you've drawn your picture, wet the back of your painting, and you need to have a surface that is not absorbent. I'm using some sticky back paper here that I've got on a board. So that's the back of my watercolour painting. I'm going to flip it over and wet the front. So really give it a good soak with a large brush. The non-absorbent surface will prevent your painting from drying out too quickly. So I'm going to actually wet the front of the painting now with a large soft brush, so both sides of the paper are wet, and this will keep the painting wet for longer, and it will really help you when you're working wet in wet. It'll also keep the painting nice and flat. The thicker the paper, the longer you need to soak it. I'm just mopping up all the puddles now and laying my painting flat, sticking to the surface almost, and everything is even, there's no puddles. I'm using a really simple palette, Ultramarine, Quinacridone Magenta, Quinacridone Gold and Hansa Yellow Light, but you could use Ultramarine, Permanent Rose, Cadmium Yellow and Raw Sienna. And I'm just painting the lightest washes on first. The painting is already wet and I'm just dropping on the yellows, the Quinacridone Gold. I've even put a little bit of blue there where there's some sky holes through the trees. If you look in the reference photograph, just dropping in all the colours, the light colours you can see wet in wet. Using a size 10 round brush, I added some ultramarine to the yellow just to paint some lighter limey sort of green colours, damp into wet. I'm now using a little bit of the Quinacridone Gold with a tiny touch of blue, painting damp into damp almost. But if you see from the surface of my paper is still shiny, so it's safe to paint. I've had loads of time to paint here, so it really is great if you wet the back of your paper and then the front. It gives you so much longer to work, especially if you're a beginner. I'm adding a little bit of blue there and just sort of going up the trunks there. I'll paint those later, but it's just to get them started and just to start building up as we do in watercolour, working light to dark. I'm just sponging in some creamy paint now. That's the yellow and the blue with a natural sponge, but you can use a synthetic sponge as well. It's just to create some texture, and this is damp into damp. I'm having so much fun here. The paper is still damp and I'm lifting off the sun rays with a damp brush. I'm keep on cleaning it as well and just sort of using the tip of the flat brush, and it just lifts off the paint, and then just wipe off the excess. Make sure you keep cleaning your brush and use a damp brush as well, not a wet brush, otherwise you're going to create a big puddle there, and then just lift off those sun rays. Believe it or not, the painting is still damp, it's still workable, the shine is still there, and I'm using my size 6 brush to paint in some really dark greens in this sort of shadow area on the left here, working damp into damp, I've mixed up Ultramarine, the Quinacridone Magenta and the Quinacridone Gold, but you could use Ultramarine Permanent Rose and raw sienna, and just paint these little marks in damp into damp. And you can also do that if you don't have a sponge. So I really hope you found that helpful. My painting's actually dried off now. I actually did sprinkle some salt as well onto the damp surface, and then I allowed it to sort of dry off naturally, and then I blow dried it just to make sure I got the painting really dry. And I'm just building up now the dark sort of thing. I don't want it too dark in this light, sort of almost like a tunnel, isn't it? That's sort of that lovely light in the distance there. So I'm just putting a little bit of green around that using my size 6 brush, and now I'm sponging in some darker green, ultramarine and yellow, just here and there. Remember, you don't want to lose your light in your watercolour, so I'm just tapping very gently to create this dark foliage. I'm just painting in a cast shadow now with my size 10 brush with a mixture of the ultramarine with a touch of the yellow, just glazing it on this sort of right hand side corner here. And now I'm using my size 6 brush and I'm just painting this first tree trunk on the right here, wet on dry, using a mixture of the blue, the pink and the Quinacridone Gold. Really dark and juicy. It's lovely how you can get these variety of colours just using these primaries. I'm just scratching off the right hand side where you can just see a little bit of the sunlight on the edge, and I'm painting in the next tree here as well, wet on dry, just building up these darks. As you can see, I'm just putting a bit of light on the edge of the left-hand side of that left-hand tree on the right-hand side, just where the sun is coming through. And now I'm painting in some branches using my twig. And that's just a twig from the garden I've sharpened with my pencil sharpener. It gives you some lovely, thin sort of branches, really nice to use. If you don't have a twig or you don't wish to use a twig, you can use a small thin brush, a liner brush. I'm using a size 2 brush here and just painting now this left hand tree here, just sort of in the middle distance to create a little bit of depth. And I'm painting a dark tree as well on the left hand side. Just actually painting just pure yellow on top there. Sometimes if you lose your light, you can actually just get yellow straight from the tube. And I'm painting this with my size 10 brush, damp into damp, just here and there, just to create a little bit more yellow light, which there is so much of it in the photograph. And I just want to finish off with some little darks and details and a little bit of light here and there. I love to finish off with a spatter. I'm using the size 2 brush and just spattering the yellow just where I see little lights here and there in the trees where the sun's caught the edge of the leaves, and I'm just spattering it just to create a little bit more texture and light. I'm actually finishing off with a little bit of a white spatter. This is gouache, but you could use white watercolour. I'm using the size 6 and just really just picking out little places where I can see some really lovely light areas to finish off. And here is the finished painting. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you'd like to support the content I create here on YouTube and want to get access to my exclusive tutorials, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? Details about the membership can be found in the description below. You'll also get access to my downloadable outline sketches. Just click Patreon in the description below. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.